somebody said to me, you know, Mr. Martin, it's pretty clear, if you listen to that, that occupying the centre, defining the centre, seeing the centre evolve was a very important part of our success. And then he said to me, you know, Stephen Harper says that he's now the centre of the political spectrum. What do you think about that? So I thought about it. Let me just tell you something. A government which that within the last month has said that there is no federal responsibility for health care in this land, that's not the centre. That's not what we're doing. To hear Munir Sheet talk about evidence-based policy. Munir Sheet was the head of Stats Canada, and a government which guts Stats Canada, which takes away from Stats Canada the possibility of developing sound policy based on reality, that's not the centre of the political spectrum. One of the speakers this morning talked about Cindy Blackstock. And for those of you who may not know, Cindy Blackstock is really the leading advocate for our Aboriginal child welfare. And she has taken a case in front of the Human Rights Tribunal to basically say that the 25% underfunding provided in terms of welfare to Aboriginal Canadians as compared to other Canadians is wrong. And the Canadian government under Stephen Harper is opposing her ability to go before the Human Rights Tribunal, saying that the Human Rights Tribunal should not hear a case of discrimination against us, the youngest and the fastest growing segment of our population, because they say that's not discrimination. Well, I'm telling you, it is discrimination, and if you don't recognize it, you're not discriminating. Says that young offenders, the majority, 8 times of the majority of which are young Aboriginal Canadians, should be sent to jail instead of being sent to school. Well, that's not the centre of the political. That's the context, which we've talked about it here, and I won't go on for too much longer, but that's the context in which we talked about Kelowna. Kelowna, which was in fact one of the most important events in Canadian public life, bringing together the provinces, the territories, as has been said in the Aboriginal leadership, and a number of you were there, but basically saying that we were going to eliminate the discrimination in terms of education, in terms of health care. And when that government walked away from Kelowna because they said it wasn't important enough, that's not the centre of the political spectrum. But the one thing that they cannot do, they cannot deny that responsibility for health care on reserve is a federal responsibility. And when you look at the state of health care, the rise of tuberculosis, of diabetes, the problems that we have seen in drug addiction the other day in Northern Ontario, that is a health care issue of which no one in this country can be proud. And it is a federal government responsibility. And they are not spending enough money on it, and they aren't spending enough attention on it. And the Kelowna Accord said that we would, they won't. Well, they're wrong, and we're right. The federal government, in terms of Ottawa-Piscat, had all of the information that it required. Every single reform, every single form was filed, everything was done. The federal government had it, and instead of standing up and saying, here's where the money went, they tried to basically fudge it by talking about $90 million over a 5-year period. That was not the right number, and it was also a false impression left with Canadians. And what they said is, here's the money that went on education, here's the money that 2,000 people over a 5-year period, and I can tell you that that money is far less than what it costs in any other community in the country to educate people, to feed people, and to build their roads. That's wrong. It is wrong to mislead the Canadian people as to the state of a situation when there's a tragedy occurring simply because you want to get yourself out of the It is beyond belief to me, those of us who followed the education file and understood the problems with that school built near a toxic dump and how much that has been part of the public debate. and to know that the leaders at Ottawa met, not with one, but with two conservative ministers of Northern Affairs, both Jim Prentice and Chuck Straw. And for the third minister to stand up in front of the public and say that he had never heard of Attawapiskat is just fundamentally beyond belief. It is not beyond the pale. I happen to know a little bit about how some of these government departments work, you know. And let me tell you, when a new minister comes in, he or she is briefed. Sheila knows it. They're briefed by what happened. By what happened by those that they are succeeding. It is impossible that government did not know exactly what was going on in Attawapiskat. And as has been said, and not only for them to blame the people of the community as opposed to saying we want to help, but to say that they had not been briefed on it just goes to show you, I can tell you if they weren't briefed on Attawapiskat, then they haven't been briefed on anything going on in the department. And if that's the case, get out and let somebody else do it. Can defer its spending. And there comes a time when a government's books are such that it has to defer spending, and I think we understand that. You can defer a road, or you can defer a building. But I'm telling you, when they walked away from Kelowna, and they deferred that spending on education, they walked away from a young person's future. That's the fundamental problem that we have here. The fact is that in our school system, you should know how to read and write by the 3rd grade. If you can't read or write by the 3rd grade, you're at a heck of a disadvantage. And if you can't read or write by grade 7 or 8 and you go into high school, you drop out. That's why the high school dropout rates are so great. Well, I'm telling you right now, there are kids who at the time of Kelowna who were 6 years old, who are now 12 and 13 and getting ready for high school, and they're dropping out because they can't read and write, whereas if Kelowna had gone ahead, they could have. And the fact of the matter is, if the government comes down and doesn't understand that a kid going into grade 6 tomorrow has got to be able to read within the next 3 years, or he or she is behind a tremendous disadvantage. That's not deferring a road. That is not deferring a building. That's deferring a young person's future. And we have no right to do that. What happened in Kelowna, and Jeff knows it because he was really one of the architects. We sat down at that table 15 months, 15, 18 months before the final meeting in Kelowna. And we said to the leadership, you tell us what the priorities are. You tell us how we should achieve it. And we will work with you. We will negotiate with you. We won't agree with everything. But we will work with you on the basis of your agenda. We will work with you on the basis of the way you think that we've got to approach the fundamental issues facing your people. And that's what happened. Every single province, every single territory, and every single member of the federal government at that table started those meetings listening. And at the end of that time, we came up with an agreement. We came up with an agreement which all of us endorsed in Kelowna. An agreement that said, this is how we're going to approach education, this is how we're going to approach health care, this is how we are going to approach clean water, this is how we are going to approach accountability, this is how we are going to approach the fundamental issues that you face as a people and that we face as a country. Because they're not only your issues, they are our issues. And the history of this country has brought us to this peace. And we're going to do it together. That's what the Conservatives walked away from. That's what the Conservatives walked away from. Why I believe that as we go ahead, it may be that Kelowna, in all of its facets, will succeed and eventually will brought forth. But I can tell you that if it doesn't, there is one thing that will not change, that Kelowna has changed forever. And that is that never again will a federal government be able to sit down with Canada's Aboriginal peoples and say it's our way or the highway. Never again will a Canadian government be able to sit down with Canada's First Peoples and say, we will not work with you, but you're going to do what we say. And I don't care how much this government tries to do that, it won't work. This country wasn't built that way. We're going to build this country.
Myself and other Aboriginal people to become involved in the party.